Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Caregiving Wisdom Series. We have a special treat for you tonight. But before we get started, for those of you who are new to the Caregiving Wisdom Series, welcome. Welcome back to those of you who've been here with us before. As you know, wisdom around the topic of caregiving comes both oftentimes from personal experiences as well as professional experiences. And there's so many aspects of caregiving that we cover in the Wisdom Series. By introduction, I'm Deb Kelsey Davis, and with me is Kelly Johnson, and together we're the co-founders of Nourish for Caregivers, and we're also caregivers too, very active caregivers. And we are so honored and excited that you're here with us tonight and for you to meet Carlos Briceno. Now, we know that your time is precious. We know that we've committed to an hour. We've promised not to go over, and we're so incredibly grateful for you being here. In addition to all of the practical information that we share here, we always incorporate and integrate spiritual nourishment. We hope that tonight for you is uplifting, encouraging, and inspiring. And again, please recall that the chat box is where we're going to be putting questions that you might have for Carlos, thoughts as Carlos is speaking, and then we're going to come back to the chat box after Carlos has completed his portion, and it gives you a chance to get your questions answered. So welcome, and we are going to move now to our next.
Going to move into prayer. So we begin as we always do in prayer, and we place ourselves in the presence of the Lord as we begin. Master Creator, you surround me with your handiwork, all its beauty, to continually remind me of your presence in my daily life and your constant love for me. Help me to become more aware of each moment, the gift of my caregiving, and the frailty of life in all its splendor. Send your Holy Spirit to inspire me when I'm tired, and give me the strength I need to push forward. Lord, open me up. Reveal to me the beauty unfolding in my handiwork, the beauty in my caregiving. May I always see and count my blessings. And as you look into my heart, may you know how grateful I am for this journey. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So let me introduce you to Carlos. Now, I would love everyone to just for a moment recognize the crazy sense of humor our God and our Lord has, because you might notice Carlos seems to be upside down tonight. And as technology would have it, the Lord says this is the way this evening is going to go. And you know what? We're going to be talking about art and beauty. This is a whole new perspective.
That's what I was going to say is I think, with art and beauty, sometimes it's just a matter of looking at things differently. So you know what? The Lord has helped us to enter into your whole discussion, Carlos.
So let me introduce you to Carlos. Carlos Briceno is a Catholic journalist whose wife and daughter have Huntington's disease, which is a rare terminal illness. He writes a blog, one dealing and detailing his experiences as a caregiver, and the other one is the Sacrament of the Present Moment. He also produces a podcast on sharing creative audio content by caregivers. Carlos, if you have been with us for a while, is also a veteran presenter of the Caregiving Wisdom Series. Some of you may remember his amazing presentation on living and caregiving in the present moment. His wisdom and strong faith allows the Lord to shine forth. We've known Carlos, Kelly, and I really since the beginning of Nourish for Caregivers. Carlos played a very important role in helping us spread the word about Nourish. Carlos has a beautiful heart and a beautiful soul, and we're so thrilled tonight, Carlos, to have you here with us. So welcome, Carlos.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate everything that you do, not only with this series, but with your ministry. You all are amazing blessing to many people. And thank you again for this invite. And everybody, I have to apologize for this. I have to say though, now I know what an upside down cake feels like. And I really think that what's happened here, the fact that for some crazy reason my camera is upside down, is because my computer is really old. It's from 2012. So I just need to save my pennies in order to buy a new one. But I think it's time. um, so tonight I'm going to be presenting, as you can see, relating to the art and beauty of caring. And the reason for this presentation, there's several fold. One is just my experiences as a caregiver, not only to a sister who had cancer, to a mother who is mentally ill, but also in the present moment, my wife and daughter have, as Deb alluded to, have something called Huntington's disease. That's a neurodegenerative disease. And what happens is it attacks your mind, it attacks your body. And the most common way that it's described is, imagine if you have ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's in one disease. So it's something that they're gene positive for. It runs in my wife's side of the family. And if you're related to someone who has it, that means you have a 50% chance of getting it. So we always knew that she had a 50% chance. She took a genetic test in 2018 and she discovered she is gene positive. And then a year later, our young adult daughter also took the genetic test and is gene positive. So in face with this understanding of what's going to happen to their health, their minds and their bodies are going to be shells of what they are now. Um, I I decided to kind of do things that can help me to cope. And one of the things that I'm blessed with is a really good imagination. And so how one of the ways I cope is that I created a podcast called Sharing About Caring. And what I do is I solicit people who are creative to submit content, plays, poems, short reflections, songs, so that they can kind of share about what they're going through as caregivers. And so in understanding the cathartic nature of that, I thought to myself, maybe I could offer something of substance to people who are caregivers and try to inspire them to understand what could be involved in the caregiving journey. Obviously, it's not an easy thing to be a caregiver. So I said to myself, well, how can one make it into an art form? And where can one discover the beauty in caring? And so this is where we are tonight. Um, so that's a illustration of Saint John Paul II. He was someone who in the Catholic Church was the leader of the Catholic Church, um, and then later became a saint. So he wrote during his pontificate, he wrote something called the Letter to Artists. And it's a beautiful letter that he wrote to try and inspire people to understand what's involved in terms of creating, but also what's involved in terms of understanding the landscape of beauty. So, Deb, if you could do the next slide. So in that, he has this great quote, and you all could read it there. And so this quote really inspires me because it gives me the understanding that um, even if you're not someone who considers himself or herself creative, even if you're someone who says like, you know what, I can't do art, I can't paint, I can't draw, I can't make music, I'm not really good at writing. I put that slide to set the tone for this, to say that, you know what, you can still make your life a masterpiece, because we all have within us this capacity to be artists. And in this particular case, what St. John Paul II is saying is that our life can be art. And so I'm going to kind of dive into that a little bit. But with that in mind, that understanding that yes, we can be artists, even if we don't think we're creative. Deb, if you could go to the next slide, please. Obviously the caregiving journey is a tough one. It's a lot of hours, it's a lot of giving of yourself. It requires a lot of unselfishness. And so oftentimes it's something where some of the duties that you have to do, for example, if someone is in bed and they can't move, perhaps you have to change them if they go to the bathroom, or if someone is really acting up because their mind is going, you have to be really patient. And so, Deb, if you can go to the next slide, please. Um, I'm going to show some images here. So when we think of beauty, maybe this image, and then if you can go to the next one, maybe this image. This isn't maybe some of the representations of what beauty may look like for the common person. If I walk up to someone in the middle of the street and say, hey, what is your concept of beauty? And these images that I'm showing here, they require a lot of patience. They require a lot of love. They require a lot of mercy. You can pause there, Deb. And so that's not to say that people can't find beauty in those, but I'm saying for the typical person, that's not usually your go-to when you think of that, being old, person's body falling apart, someone who requires a lot of attention. That may not be your image of beauty. So I want to give an example. That's my picture of my father. He died in 2010, but years ago when I was younger, and he was in his mid to late 70s, he started to slow down a lot. And so I was living in Florida at the time, which is where he was living. I had moved there from New York City because he had suffered a stroke and they diagnosed him with Parkinson's. I'm sorry, Alzheimer's. And so one day, after he recovered from the stroke and he was able to regain like his movement, um, one day we went to the store. We had to find something. I don't remember what it was, but it was one of those giant Lowe's stores. And if you know, those are cavernous kind of stores. And so as we walked, he didn't walk as fast as he normally did. As I said, he's getting older. He was really slowing down. Obviously, the stroke didn't really help his mobility a lot. So in walking through the store, because he was walking so slowly, I got impatient. And so I decided to walk ahead to try and find what we were looking for. And in the process of walking ahead, I lost him. And as you know, when you have children and you lose your child, it's not a great feeling. Um, and so I remember kind of panicking a little bit, like, oh my gosh, where's dad? Where did he go? And so I spent the next like 5 minutes trying to find him. Eventually I did. Um, when I reflected upon that later, when I got older and after he had died, I realized that in understanding him, in seeing that he was someone who had slowed down, I realized that what what went through my mind was I didn't want him to be that way. I didn't want my dad to be old. I didn't want him to slow down, to be slowing down. I wanted him to be the man that I knew when I was younger, someone who kept up, someone who was quick and sharp. And he wasn't as sharp then, obviously. And so I realized that basically what I was doing was that I was in denial. And I realized that what I should have done was kind of understood the beauty of the moment. And that moment was, here I was in this big store with my dad. And instead of enjoying that time and walking at his pace, understanding that he couldn't keep up with my pace, and also understanding that one day as I got older and I got to be his age, I was going to be going that speed. And I think if you were to ask anyone, they would probably say to you, especially if you get older, that you would want someone to understand what you were going through and be there by your side to make sure that they were doing okay. And of course, all that slipped through my mind. And that's just one of the errors of youth, where when we're young, as that saying goes, youth is wasted on the young. So understanding that there was a lot of beauty in that moment, that I was there with my dad and he was alive and he was able to walk. And so instead of seeing that beauty, kind of making my life a masterpiece in that sense of just being there with him and seeing that I was helping him just by being by his side, I neglected that, and I really regret that moment. It's one of the things that I get sad whenever I think about that. So Deb, if you could go to the next slide. So what is beauty? And I want to share with you some definitions, and I'll let you know, Deb, when to go to the next slide. So here's just some, like off the top of my head, just things that when you think about beauty, what does it mean basically? Well, obviously it's attractive. And Deb, you could go to the next slide, please. Um, it evokes wonder, it evokes joy, it gives us a feeling of delight. It makes us sometimes feel this longing. Obviously, churches like this church is, one of the reasons why they make these beautiful cathedrals is to give this longing for God. Like this, God is amazing. He's an almighty. So when you enter a church building like this, you see the style of why they built it the way they did. Um, to raise your eyes towards the heavens, we get this understanding that our hearts long for that, our hearts long for God, our hearts long for the eternity. And also, like, part of beauty is that we want to fall in love with beauty. That's why people fall in love, right? You see someone beautiful and you say, wow, I could fall in love with that person and I want to spend time with that person. It invokes also, it inspires us to sing praises. If you look at the Divine Comedy by Dante, Beatrice was somebody who inspired him. He had met this girl when he was young, and he never forgot her beauty. So poets write songs, singers write songs to praise beauty. And obviously it's something that we want to stay in his presence. If you go to the next slide, please. You see this, and anytime we're out in nature, we see beautiful flowers like this, the colors, the fragrance, you could feel the sun's warmth there. Like, we just want to remain there and just look at that and take these deep breaths and spring does that a lot when we're emerging from the kind of harshness and darkness of winter. Spring kind of has that feeling that delights us and makes us understand, like, wow, that's amazing to see things like that. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this is irresistible. I used to live in Florida. I used to see scenes like that all the time. I used to live 5 minutes away from the beach. And then when you see this scene and you see the water and you see the sun and you feel the warmth of the sky and those different colors, like the melting of those different colors, you take this deep breath and it just makes you happy. And it gives you the sense of peace. And St. Thomas Aquinas said that he defined beauty as, quote, that which being seen pleases. So in showing you these different pictures, my hope is that when you saw them, it pleased you. He also said, St. Thomas Aquinas also said that the beautiful is, he described as, quote, the attractive aspect of the good. So beautiful violin sound. And it was from a concert, I think, by Mozart. So just imagine playing that in your head, like the beautiful sound that a violin makes. And again, when we see human beings, when we see this, I don't know who this woman is. It's a stock photograph, but I could think that anyone who sees this can say, wow, that's her eyes are just amazing. That's beauty there. And so Pope Benedict said in one of his pre-papal writings, he spoke about the experience of, and this is a quote, being wounded by the arrow of beauty. And again, like these words, what I'm trying to make you understand is by these different quotes to kind of elevate our minds and our hearts to what beauty means. And Ratzinger said that, he said that, quote, the encounter with the beautiful can become the wound of the arrow that strikes the heart, and in this way opens our eyes. So again, I keep reiterating the sound of beauty, because I'm going to be leading to the point that I'm going to be making later of what does this all mean in the lives of us as caregivers. So if you go to the next slide, please. So St. Augustine, so here's an image of obviously Christ. And when we look at that, that's not beautiful, right? This man has been brutally tortured. This man who did nobody any harm. This man who healed, this man who loved, this man who forgave, who showed mercy, who taught us the way. There he is suffering, just a horrible death. And so St. Augustine wrote of God as being the beauty of all things beautiful. And then specifically in referring to Christ, St. Augustine said, he then is beautiful in heaven, beautiful on earth, beautiful in the womb, beautiful in his parents' arms, beautiful in his miracles, beautiful under the scourge, beautiful when inviting to life, beautiful in laying down his life, beautiful in taking it up again, beautiful on the cross, beautiful in the sepulcher with the tomb, and beautiful in heaven. So Saint Augustine really beautifully writes about the beauty of Christ, like everything that he did, this outpouring of love, this outpouring of mercy, this outpouring of taking all our sins so that we could have salvation one day. And Saint Augustine kind of in that little paragraph said to us, this man, everything that he did, everything that he said, everything that he represented was beautiful. And again, we look at that and say, we can say that's a horrible scene, or say, wow, that's incredible, the amount of love that's represented on there. And so um, with that in mind, um, I want to kind of switch gears now. And switching gears, this quote, I love this quote. And again, you all can read that. But so what then does art, and I'm going to use the word art in a very kind of general way, because usually art means, a painting, a drawing. I'm going to broaden that to say anything artistic or creative. So that means, writing. That means could be a poem. It could be a letter. It could be writing a song. It could be creating some type of sculpture or pottery. That all that encompasses art. So what this painter said beautifully there is that all that points to something. It means that we're bigger. There's something bigger out there. There's something more beautiful that we need to tap into. And one of the reasons why I brought up Christ is, and if you go to the next slide, um, is this the beauty of what's contained in our hearts. And so Pope Benedict the 16th, in one of his encyclicals, wrote about, he said that the Christian program, and he's referring to the program of the Good Samaritan, the program of Jesus is, and I'm going to quote him here, is a heart that sees. So if you go back to that heart image, please, that heart image is our hearts can see. And that day, when I was with my father, my heart did not see. I was acting selfishly. I was acting as someone who had all this energy, was able to move around well, had a lot of my faculties present. And I was not seeing my father. I was not seeing what he brought to the table, the beauty of this old man who had taken care of me when I needed help, when I was unable to move well, when I was a kid. This man who always listened to me, this man who always showed so much love and patience and empathy toward me. I'd closed off my heart to that because I was in a rush. And I didn't see the beauty of that moment. I couldn't see that I could have made my life at that moment a masterpiece and seen it artistically with a heart that sees. And Benedict says, he says, this heart sees where love is needed and acts accordingly. And so that is such a deep thing. And what I want to say to you is that if you can go to the next slide, please. This quote from St. Paul VI is beautiful, and I have been reading these because I know that you all can read them, but I think this is really important. True beauty is the privilege of love, because love alone is able to detect beauty as gift freely given. Beauty contains meaning, amazement, joyful, and grateful understanding. So when I think back again to that moment in that Lowe's, the beauty was, my dad, thank God, was alive. My dad, even though he had suffered something that could have really debilitated him, that stroke, and even though he had something where he was going to be losing his mind, um, he still was there. He was still present. I could still have a conversation with him. And you know what? That's amazing. That capacity to do all that. We take that for granted. And as you know, if you're taking care of somebody and maybe they're not able to do that, um, what a shame that they can't do that. And the fact that we can means something. The fact that we can see them and can understand them and can feel all the things that we feel, that's amazing. And if they're there, if they're still alive, even if they're suffering, that's something that should fill us with joy. As we know, in this year of COVID, when so many people died and so many people couldn't be there when their friend or their family member died, that was so sad. But the fact, if they're still living, even again, God forbid, if you know someone who's suffering, yes, that's sad. But there's also redemption in suffering. If it means that that person is understanding what Christ went through, and Christ knows what they went through, that person is going through, because he suffered. And what I've understand in terms of my life, with the sadness of both the terminal illnesses of my wife and daughter, is that um, the the more suffering that enters into my life, that's an opportunity for me to get closer to God. So instead of seeing suffering as something negative, I see that as something positive, to get closer to Him, to know what He went through, to know the kind of love that He displayed in that cross, and the love that He's pouring out to me every second, and all the blessings that He blesses me with. The fact that I can see, the fact that I can hear, the fact that I can breathe, the fact that I can move my hands. Those are amazing blessings. The blessings that my wife is still alive, my daughter's still alive, those are amazing. So in those moments, I say, if something sad is going on, or something that involves suffering, I say, Lord, you're giving me the opportunity to get closer to you, to say, I need you. I need you more in my life. I need you to bring your love and mercy in my life, so that I can then pour that love and mercy out to other people. And so that's makes me full of joy, and it also fills me with gratitude that we have a God who's able to do all that, who's able to send His Son as a sacrifice, so that we have the chance for eternal salvation. And so that that gift that Christ gave to us, which He freely gave, and the grace that's offered to us, which again is a free gift, all that comes from love. And so all that is beautiful. And so in that, we have to understand and see all the beauty that happens in our lives, even if we're taking care of someone, even if it's really hard to be patient. But if you plug into that beauty that Christ gives, that beauty where He understands suffering because He was there. His whole family understood suffering. If you think about it, just starting when he was born, that kid was a marked man, and that family had to flee from potential people who wanted to kill him, and all the suffering that Mary went through seeing her son. All that points to, they get it. And because they get it, where's the beauty? And the beauty is what he says, that true beauty is the privilege of love, because love alone is able to detect beauty as a gift freely given. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is a picture of, everyone I'm sure recognizes this guy, Einstein. He has this great quote, if you go to the next slide, please, where he talks about the imagination. He talks about the power of the imagination. Everyone has imagination. I know a lot of people may not think that they have it, but you have it. Some people exercise it a little more than others, but you still have it. And so I think what happens in our caregiving journeys, in our life journeys, where we say, well, I don't know how to make my life a masterpiece. I think by saying that, you kind of put your imagination in a box. And when you put your imagination in a box, you're not able to fully explore the kind of masterpiece that you can see. And if you block the heart that has eyes to see, it blocks that beauty, and it blocks the kind of creativity that you can bring to bear to your lives, so that you can switch from just maybe grumbling, like I did with my dad, and or getting fed up with certain aspects of your life, or just being exhausted by the things you have to do. Um, so by tapping into your imagination, which is one of the things I do all the time, and that Sharing About Caring podcast is an example of that, where not only do I produce stuff like the show itself, but also soliciting other people to tap into their imaginations and creativity, to show that by doing that, they're able to express themselves, and there's great catharsis in doing that. There's great therapeutic value in doing that. And in doing all that, you're creating that masterpiece that St. John Paul II alluded to in that opening slide, where you're taking what potentially could be a lot of darkness, a lot of sadness, possibly tears, um, a lot of grumbling, and you're turning that into good, where you're sharing from your heart and with this eyes that see, and you're seeing what's there. And even if it's a cry from the heart, even if it's you're just crying out in anguish of like, man, my life is hard. When you do that, again, the therapeutic cathartic value of that is immense. And you may say to yourself, well, I don't know how to write. I don't know how to write a song. I don't know how to paint. I don't know how to do this and how to do that. If you go to the next slide, please. Um, Obviously, there's always going to be obstacles in life. Always, 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 no matter what you do. Look at this obstacle. Like, I turned on my computer fully expecting you all to see me right side up. And then all of a sudden there's an obstacle where for whatever crazy reason, I'm upside down. So even something as simple as that, as basic as that, there's always going to be obstacles. And so if you could go to the next slide, um, thank you. Um, this is something that really halts people who think they aren't creative, who say, you know what, like I really don't know how to access my imagination. And this guy's written a book called Creative Confidence, he and his brother. And so they talk a lot about creative confidence. And basically what they say is that creative confidence is something essentially like a muscle. The more you create, the more confident you get. And even if it's hard at first, just like anything, you know, when you were young and you started to try to walk, you would fall down a lot. But little kids, they're resilient. They just get up and try it again. They fall, they get up, they fall, they get up. And eventually you start to walk and you get that confidence to say, hey, I can do it. You're a little wobbly at first, but you're still able to do it. And the creative muscles are like that. You may fall, like it may not be something that you may say to yourself, well, this isn't that good, or I'll never show it to somebody, or whatever. Ultimately, it's just a matter of saying, you know what, I need to overcome this fear. I need to just get over that and just create. And even if it's not something that you feel like you could show to someone, just the mere fact that you're doing it is creating that masterpiece in your life, because you're doing something. You're trying to see where the beauty is. You're trying with your heart to see with that heart that sees, and bring love into that equation. If you go to the next slide, please. So obviously when you try to go down this path of trying to create something, um, and you're going to compare, well, it's not good enough, that person over there, like he writes better than I can't do that. And a friend of mine has this great saying. He says, compare, despair, compare, despair. So obviously what does that mean is the second you start comparing, you're going to start despairing. And in the spiritual battle, which covers every inch of our lives and every second of our lives, the devil's always there whispering to you, saying you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not funny enough, you're unworthy. And obviously, in that landscape of that battle, part of what's going to happen to you is you're going to succumb to that comparing. Well, it's just not good. It's not something that my friend over there, who's much better than I am. And my point to you is, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. Um, if you share with friends, my assumption is they're going to be supportive. Um, but ultimately, what matters is the fact that you're trying to make a masterpiece of your life. You're trying to elevate your heart, your mind through your imagination, to a point where you're seeing and you're feeling, and in seeing and feeling, you're creating. And so in that creating, you're doing something that is just adding to your life. And I just speak from my experience, just from just writing all the time and doing these podcasts, that just the mere act of creating brings that kind of beauty into someone's life. So if you go to the next slide, something that halts us too from creating is unforgiveness. And what does that mean? Sometimes maybe the person we're caring, we didn't have a good relationship with that person, or maybe that person has hurt you. Maybe it's your sister, and through sibling rivalry or something like that, you bring all this unforgiveness to the table. So that often blocks you from creating something. And so that's a wound, hopefully, that you can go around by bringing mercy to the table and trying to forgive that person for things that they did and didn't do to you. And in doing that, in forgiving and getting rid of unforgiveness, basically, that really frees your heart, your mind, and your soul to be able to have that room to be able to create. Because again, what you're trying to do is create that space in your heart where you're just so full of love, that you're an artist, and that's what artists do. They're so full of love in their heart that they have to create something to acknowledge the beauty that they feel, which is obviously a gift from God. If you go to the next slide, please. Um, Obviously, this is a huge, huge, huge component of what can halt us from creating. And also, to be honest, from making your life a masterpiece. Um, I'm really busy. You know, you're caught up with work, and then you have to take care of somebody, and you don't have any time for yourself, or you're just too tired because you're pouring all this energy into somebody, or you have a job that causes you to travel, and the stresses of all life, especially during COVID, that could make anybody tired, even the hardiest of souls. And totally understand that that's something that is a legit thing to halt us. But I have to turn back to, if you can go to the next slide, please, to him. So just in my life, in going through all the kind of caregiving stuff that I've gone through, understanding what's ahead in my caregiving journey, what I've learned how to do through God's grace is just surrender to him. And I know for a lot of people that's really hard. You have doubts. I'm not good enough. I like to be in control. I get all those excuses. That's part of our humanity, our fallen humanity. But if you're able to surrender to him and say, Lord, I need you. Um, I'm tired of being self-sufficient. um, you have great power. Literally have no power. If it wasn't for you, making all of what surrounds us, the air, oxygen, all the things that sustain us in our lives, without you, I couldn't live, basically. So once I understood that and said, Lord, I'm a beggar, and literally coming to him with, my hands like this and saying, I need your help. And obviously, like St. Paul talks about, our his power is becomes more powerful when we acknowledge our weaknesses. So once you start to tap into his strength, which is basically opening your heart, just opening it up so that his love and mercy pours in. And this is the perfect example, what you're seeing here, that picture there of that stained glass of love and mercy in action. The more you decrease and the more he increases, your tiredness disappears. Like, I've I with a lot of the sadness that's happened in my life. My sister died tragically in 2019. A crazy story, a brutal story. A tree from a neighbor's yard, 150-foot red oak tree, fell on the car that she was in her driveway, um, outside her home, 20 yards away from her house. She was parked there, with her son. He was unhurt, but when the tree landed, it severed her spinal cord and it caused traumatic brain injury. She died. In the midst of that tragedy in 2019, in the midst of the sadness of my wife and daughter with their diagnoses, I've never felt more peace, more joy, and more energy than since my surrender to him. And so that excuse ultimately is invalid. And it's invalid because the more you decrease, the more he increases, the more the Holy Spirit works in you, the more you're able to have that kind of love, which then translates into that energy, basically. And the only way, the best way to describe it is to say, try it. And if you go down that path, you'll know exactly what I mean. And so once you're plugged into him, it's you're plugged into the basically the energy of the universe, which is essentially saying truth, beauty, and goodness. And when that radiates out from you, you're not tired. Like, you're able to put up with whatever. Um, and so if you go to the next slide, please. That leads to this, next slide, basically, which is one of the ways to try and make your life a masterpiece, is through the power of prayer, basically, is that imploring of, Lord, I need you, I need you, I need you. I need you to help me to show more mercy. I need you to show more forgiveness. I need you to help me to be a better person. And in that, help me to help my heart to see. And in that, what pours in again is all these graces. And those graces then are, you're able to fashion your life into a masterpiece. You're able to see what needs to be seen, and you're able to do what needs to be done. And in those ways, and hopefully if that includes creating something um, that can be cathartic, can kind of share some of what's in your heart, that goes a long way. And so ultimately, by praying, what I'm saying to you is prayer changes us, as Mother Teresa says there, and we change things. And how do we change things? Well, we're able to pour out more to the people we care for. We're able to see better, the heart, that sees and is able to take the action, the right kind of actions that that person who's suffering or that person who needs care in our lives needs. And ultimately, part of that change could be turning your life into a masterpiece where you're seeing all this beauty. And then once that beauty enters your heart, you're then reflecting it out in not only how you live, how you speak, what you do, but also possibly through the creative things that you do. And so if you can go to the next slide, ultimately, this quote impacts the world. And how you interpret that quote is what you will take from this talk, I think, and how inspired you are to see the beauty in your life, to try and create the masterpiece that artists do in their lives. And then in doing that, when saving the world could be as simple as having the kind of sanity, having the kind of peace that every human being needs, having that kind of abundant life that God wants for each and every one of us. And in doing that, you're able to make the lives of the people around you, including and especially the ones that you're taking care of, you change their world just by that care that you bring to the table, just by making their lives a little bit easier. And like ultimately, if there's no cure for whatever they have, or you're not able to really truly give them the peace that they need because you don't have that magic drug to make them better, to make them walk, to make their minds clear. You won't maybe save their life, so to speak, but I think what that quote means for me, beauty will save the world, what that means for me is you will be injecting truth, beauty, and goodness into the world, and you'll be radiating that love and peace of God and Christ into the world, and that saves the world. So I just want to thank you for listening, and I hope whatever it is that you all do in your lives, that you make it a masterpiece, and that you're able to create something. It could be something as simple as just a letter where you're pouring your heart out to somebody, and hopefully that can make a difference in someone's lives. So I'm open to any questions if you all have any. I'm also, if you need any encouragement or help, please reach out to me. I'm assuming they're going to put my information, how to reach me, by email, and I'm more than happy to encourage or help or give advice or anything like that.
Carlos, thank you. Amazing, so much to think about. And again, part of art and part of life is that sense of humor. So when I see you upside down there, Carlos, talk about taking a situation.
I'm going to turn my computer upside down. Wait, how does this go? How do I?
You were right. Yeah.
Is that the right way? Like that?
Yeah. But now you've cut your head off, so all good.
There. So I'm just holding. Yeah. So here I am, people. I really am normal.
And how many of you, speaking of unlocking imagination, how many of you imagined as you were looking at Carlos upside down what he looked like right side up? Art and creativity, Carlos, inviting others, as you were maybe experiencing some of what Carlos was saying about how we see beauty and how the heart sees, which is a very profound way to look at beauty. If there's something that came to you while Carlos was speaking, please put that in the chat. But Carlos, I'd like to start out with a question of mine, which is, I love to paint. I am an artist by nature, but sometimes I do get those blocks, the blocks that you were talking about. Is there, and I pray and I try to make the time, but are there things you might offer to all of us that can help you get unblocked?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I think um, a lot of times, we're faced with so many stresses in our lives, and obviously that affects our mental health, and it affects what we do and how we do it. And sometimes it could just be as simple as just be really kind to yourself. Sometimes we can be really hard, and again, the whole being busy, running. Sometimes being kind to yourself means, you know what, I'm going to just take a day or 2 hours where I'm just going to do something just for myself. Because a lot of times caregivers, they're always giving, and thank God, right? But oftentimes they forget themselves. And so I think just taking a break like that can go a long way in terms of de-stressing and just relaxing you. And sometimes you just need that. I also find being in nature helps, just that connection. And again, just seeing that beauty in nature, just going somewhere, either with somebody or by yourself, and just reconnecting that way can bring you back. Because ultimately, being inspired, the literal translation of, inspiration is like breath from God. And so you just need sometimes that breath from God. And so just taking that moment where you can actually exhale, by relaxing and just breathing, either in nature or just by yourself or by pampering yourself deliberately, can create that space in your head that just frees you. So I hope that's helpful.
Very
Putting
much.
yourself in a place where you can feel the breath from God, and
Yep.
oftentimes that's in nature, or
Yep.
moving yourself from removing from one situation
Yep.
to another, things like
Yep.
that. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah. And I think the other thing too with that too is remembering that not everything has to be the masterpiece, that
Right.
everything doesn't have to be the epic novel. Maybe it's a haiku, so
Yep.
there's all sorts of places to just jump in and begin with that. Yeah, that's good. I like to, Carlos, when you were talking about imagination and creativity, it reminded me actually a part of Deb and my book, and talking about how creativity allows us to imagine a different situation or a different outcome or a different response. And then that goes back to that idea of seeing with the heart of love. And your example of you with your dad, I think, was a perfect example of how creativity in that situation would have allowed you to act in a different way, as opposed to being the frustrated with that. So
Yep.
yeah.
Elizabeth, actually,
My arm is getting tired, so I'm going to flip this back.
okay.
Sorry for that jarring turn there, but whew.
So Carlos, Elizabeth in chat says, I'm glad you mentioned being kind to yourself. That day you had at Lowe's happens to me a lot. And I realize it's part of the grieving process of me accepting that I've lost the person my mom once was, and that we can no longer do the things we used to.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, again, if you can see, if you use your heart to see and see that, but also just see the beauty in that, in that, all the memories, all the things that she did. Like, thank God she was there, right? Thank God
Right.
that she did this and this and this, and um be, just because she can't do that anymore still doesn't diminish her as a person, because you do have those memories. um and ultimately, again, like, if you just um, pour love into that situation, um, then love, it's kind of like, when you wake up at 3 in the morning because your kid, maybe 6 months, is crying. Like, your first reaction is, I'm really tired, but the second reaction is, I love this kid so much that no matter what happens, I'm going to make sure that this kid calms down. And love is such a powerful weapon, basically, in all this, and just pouring that love rather than anger, basically. And but again, understanding that grief is part of this process, and that's part of being kind to yourself, is understanding that and saying this is normal. But again, tapping into that, to that person of Christ, just handing all that grief to him, or his mother who understood grief and sorrow, helps a lot. It's helped me a lot. And again, that's hard. That's not easy for us because we like to have control. We like to be self-sufficient. And my advice is, don't let that go. And I swear to you, if you're able to do that, your life changes.
You had right there in talking about that idea of surrendering and how important that is, and important is to the creativity, the process of creativity. Absolutely. And that's something that it's not something that you just manage it once and you're all set and good to go. That's an ongoing surrender and an ongoing process. And similarly, Maureen commented that perfect is the enemy, kind of that enemy as you're going through things.
Yeah.
And she went on to comment, it took me a while, but I found that with my husband, there were things that we could still do. We just had to make adjustments for his ability. And we need to prioritize what we could or couldn't do. And so that, again, it doesn't have to be perfect or exactly the way it was. And you do have to grieve some of that and allow for the losses, but maybe there are adjustments that allow for that. So.
Right. And part of how I've tried to make my life like a masterpiece is you can look at that and see the diminishment and see the person not be the same. And you can say, you can get mad at that, right? Or you can say, you know what, this is teaching me how to appreciate every single little thing in life.
Yeah.
So one way is a negative way, another way, and this is how, again, how do you make a masterpiece? To me, that's one way. But when using my imagination, I can kind of project like how there's always good, right? And Romans 8:28 says that God makes good out of all things for those who love him. And so again, it's that concept of love. If you love God, he will help you to see where the good is. And in the good, like I part of what keeps me going is gratitude, to be quite frank. Like I'm so grateful for every single little thing these days. And when you live with that attitude of gratitude, it just fills your heart, and your heart doesn't have room to be angry. It doesn't have room to be bitter or lamenting the past. And alluding to what my previous presentation, like by staying in the moment, you realize there's so many blessings going on. Like the past is done. How he used to be, that's done. What is right now, there's so many blessings being poured out in that moment. And that's where you need to concentrate on and make the masterpiece happen.
And Carlos, I know that we're getting near the end of the hour, but I wanted to share the 2 additional comments that came in, again, from Elizabeth. Definitely, it's about perspective. And Maureen, I know that what you've put in here really strikes me, because you say, do not worry about what is lost. Celebrate what is still there. Another wonderful sort of way to look at it through the lens of that perspective, right? What's still there, and the gratitude you were talking about, Carlos. We can stay on after we end. We want to make sure we keep to our commitment of an hour, but we are definitely appreciative of the comments and the questions. And I'm going to share the screen again, because I want to make sure everyone knows how to reach Carlos. So again, we've got the address up here, the website for connecting with Carlos with this podcast, and how to also find him on Twitter. And remember, we post these videos, so you also have access to that, so that you can actually find Carlos.
Thank you all again.
And thank you, Carlos. And just want to remind everyone that there are additional resources available on the Nourish for Caregivers website. So please feel free to check that out, so that there's different tips and things that you may need to encourage you as you're going through your caregiving journey. And then, hard to believe, in 2 weeks will be June. And so please plan to join us in June for our next Caregiver Wisdom Series. Isn't this interesting? We have 2 gentlemen speaking twice in a row. but a very positive and upbeat presentation from Bill Clark, who's out of the Archdiocese of Atlanta. So
I
please
challenge him to top my upside downness, though.
you know what? That is true. That is true. I challenge anyone to. That's great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And Carlos, thank you. Thank you so much. I would say thank you for hanging in there with us.
Oh, bad pun.
I Hanging out.
Thank you all.
If we can't laugh,
Excuse me while I dance on the ceiling now. Bye.
Right.
Carlos, thank you.
Thank
you. Ciao.
Thank you.